Welcome to Educated Kids learning session. As usual, we are bringing new ideas, new techniques for the skill development of the children so that we ensure maximum possible skill is improved in the progressive years of the child so that we ensure that the child enjoys a very productive years when the child gets into the productive ages going further. So we are starting from today the social skill development series, and in the series we'll be dealing with all the possible ways, techniques through which we would be developing the social and emotional skills of the child. So in this series, in the broad heading, we'll be managing the social skills and improving the social skills by dealing with two very important components of social skilling. One is the social skill by itself, and second component we are going to deal with is the problem behavior. So in these two broad categories of social skills and problem behavior, we are going to deal with 8 components, and these 8 components will help us to identify the areas of improvement in our children, and that will help us to create strategies so that we work with our children to make sure our child's social and emotional skills become very effective and child manages such skills in the future. So today we are talking about the introduction of the whole thing, and post that we'll take up one by one issues in forthcoming sessions. Now, when we talk about social and emotional skill, perhaps this is the most important skill that a child needs to develop, because we are living in a society and interaction and connecting with others become very important, and we often feel and experience that a child who is very good in connecting with others, they are more likely to be very successful in their future years as compared to those children who are introvert and who are having difficulties in connecting with others in most effective way. Therefore, this 2 to 6 years of age is considered to be the foundation year for the children to develop their social and emotional skills. And for this purpose, this is one of the area we talk very often in various forum. And while we are discussing the social and emotional skills, we would like to discuss it again. So this is called the sensitivity period of skill development of the child. And if you look to this graph, which is adapted from NAS in the research of early years of study of the children, it shows, if you can just look to various skills, that shows that how it grows with age, and after that the growth intensity falls down. If you look two major things here, habitual ways of responding, that becomes a social pattern of behavior, and emotional control. If you look to these two things, and pure social skills we'll talk later, but if you look to these two things, emotional control and habitual ways of responding, you can see very well the sensitivity period is very high in the beginning of the years, meaning the probability that a child gains such skill very fast if it is adopted in the early years as compared to the age when the child is grows up. So you can see after 4.5 5 years, the incentive intensity falls down to bare minimum, although there will be some improvement of this particular skill, but the intensity remains very high in the initial period. So if we can see it by putting a graphical picture, you can see that in x-axis if we measure the age of the child, and in y-axis we measure the intensity. That means probability the child will learn this skill very well. Then from 0 it goes up to 100%. Then how does it work? This is a uh, kind of curve will be getting like this. In the early years it starts picking up very high. Then after certain point, maybe you can see in the when the child will be reaching the age of 3 years or 4 years, then the intensity or probability or the strength of getting this skill becomes highest, and post that the intensity falls down. It doesn't mean that the skill adoption quality or skill adoption is declining, but the rate, the degree at which the child is gaining this particular skill will fall gradually once the child grows up. So therefore, it is very, very important for the teachers and parents to understand these 2 years to 6 years are very, very productive years for the child to work on the social and emotional skills. Now, if you look social skills, then social skills is a group of various skills. It includes a lot of components into that. We'll discuss on that. Social skill is one component. When we are discussing about the whole gamut of social and emotional skill development of the children, then there are a lot of science behind this. And our effort is to bring those scientific facts in front of you so that we can work very well with our children, so that to ensure that our child is not lagging behind those potential skills which can be adopted very easily. So one component is the social skill and another component is the problem behavior. So both these things are interconnected, meaning if the child's social skill is very high, the problem behavior is bound to be less. And if the problem behavior is very high, that means the social skill of the child is somewhere or some point of time is compromised, so that both are not syncing well together. So if we look both these things, both are interconnected to each other. If social skills are low, then problem behavior will be high. If the problem behavior is low, social skill will be high. And both these things together impact the social effectiveness as well as academic functioning of the child. Therefore, this social and academic function, they also interact independently to problem behavior as well as independently to social skills. Meaning, if the social skill of the child is very good, it helps to achieve better academic results. So also the same with the problem behavior. If the problem behavior is low, then academic performance is bound to be high. And if the problem behavior would be high, then the academic performance of the child is bound to be affected negatively. So we understand these two things, social skills and problem behavior. So we are taking these two components into our child skill development strategy so that we understand those things very well and work on them quite effectively. Now, to do this, we need techniques to have something, as we are always saying that in educated kids, we work on scientific basis to bring some kind of strategies and techniques for the skill development of the child. So in this case, to work on the social and emotional skill series, we are taking preschool and kindergarten behavior scale, which is known as PKBS. And this PKBS, that is preschool and kindergarten behavior scale, was developed by scientist Kenneth W. Merrill in the year 1994. And this is a very, very practical and quite effective tool. And across world, many countries, they are following this tool to ensure that social and emotional skill of the child are managed quite well. So under this PKBS2, that is the second edition of preschool and kindergarten behavioral scale, there are two components as we have talked about. One is social skills component, and under this social skills component, this PKBS2 has taken three sub criteria. And second component is the problem behavior, and under this problem behavior, there are five sub criteria. So therefore, three sub-criteria under social skills and five sub-criteria under problem behavior. So we'll be having total 8 sub-criteria to deal with the social and emotional skill of the child of our children. Now let's go to these three sub-criteria under the social skill section. So if we manage and evaluate these three sub-criteria under social skill, it is it is going to be very easy for the teachers and parents to manage those social skills with very effectively. Now let's see what are those three sub criteria under the social skill we are going to manage. Number one is social cooperation. So social cooperation will deal details on this social cooperation while we'll go details into that, but in a nutshell, it talks about the child's association with the society as a whole. So under that, we are dealing with 12 checkpoints, and if we are aware about these 12 checkpoints that defines the social cooperation of the child, then it becomes easy for the teachers and parents to manage those 12 checkpoints and so also this particular skill of the child. Then second sub criteria under the social skill is social interaction. Social interaction, as we know, if the child is able to express himself or herself effectively, then social skill is bound to be better. So to manage this and evaluate this, we have got 11 checkpoints under this, and these 11 checkpoints will be discussing in details and the strategies around these 11 checkpoints and how in a preschool segment or at home we can develop this social interaction skill of the child through this technique. We'll discuss in details going further in the social skill development series. And the third sub criteria under social skill is social independence. Although we are talking about social cooperation, social interaction, but social independence is another skill the child must learn in order to make himself or herself socially effective to deal with all the social issues that is cropping up in front of us. And under this, we have got some 11 checkpoints. And if these 11 checkpoints can be managed, if the 11 checkpoints can be evaluated from time to time, then we are bound to develop those skills in our children. So these three sub criteria under social skill can be measured and evaluated quite easily. I am repeating again, we have got a philosophy at Educated Kids. We always say if something is measured, if something is documented, then we have a better chance to manage them quite effectively. Therefore, we bring these three sub criteria like social cooperation, social interaction, and social independence. These three things can be measured, can be evaluated, and can be documented quite well. So the checkpoints, if we have to evaluate them, we have to score them, how we can evaluate these three sub criteria. So number one, all the checkpoints under three sub criteria can be evaluated by putting 4 options. Meaning when we take up one criteria under each sub criteria, each checkpoint under each sub criteria, then each checkpoint will be having 4 possible options. Either child will be never able to do that in that particular checkpoint, what we are just trying to evaluate to our child. If the answer is never, child is never able to do that, then we put a score of 0. Then second possibility is that the checkpoint what we are trying to evaluate our child by taking that particular social skill, if it is rarely related to that particular checkpoint which we are trying to evaluate by putting that checkpoint on our child, in that case, the score will be assigned 1. Then if that particular skill through that checkpoint we are trying to evaluate on our child, if sometimes our child is able to do it, or in other words, the answer to the checkpoint is sometimes, then we assign a score of 2. And if the particular checkpoint indicates that our child is able to do that quite easily, and upon the child is doing that, we'll be assigning a score of 3. So we'll discuss those scoring and evaluation outcome in details while we'll be taking up each of the social skill sub criteria in our forthcoming session. So you need not worry, but one thing we are just trying to communicate to you is that through this scoring system, we will be able to quantify the skilling of our children, so that we know where our child stands and how much improvement our child requires, so that we can put our strategies and put up our efforts accordingly, so that we can measure that improvement in our child. So in this, if the final score will vary from criteria to criteria, so we'll discuss them in details while we'll be taking up those criteria. But bigger the score, in this case, while we'll be measuring 3 sub criteria, if the score will be high, then the social skill of that particular sub criteria will be high, and vice versa. So this is all about the social skills. Now moving to the problem behavior. So problem behavior is the second major component of managing the social skill of our child. And under this problem behavior, we have got 5 sub criteria. Number 1 sub criteria is self-centered or explosive. So this particular sub criteria deals with if the child is very aggressive and self-centered and quite explosive in nature. Under that, we have got 11 checkpoints, meaning these 11 checkpoints will help us to evaluate and manage if our child is self-centered. So self-centered meaning there is some problem behavior in the child, and if we understand that, we accept it, then that provides the opportunity for us to correct that in our child, so that will make our child better in the future. Then second sub criteria under the problem behavior is the attention problem or overactive. We have been discussing this inattention and hyperactive. So this is something related to that. If our child having a problem of inattention to a particular thing, then also there is a problem behavior, and that leads to performance issues in the future. So also, if the child is hyperactive, then also there is some problem. So to manage them, to evaluate them, we have got 8 checkpoints. These 8 checkpoints will help us to evaluate and manage the attention problems in our children, and that will give, once we manage them, once we evaluate them, that will give us better ways to address them and make sure that those skills have been uh, developed to the maximum possible extent in our child. Then moving to the third sub criteria. Third sub criteria deals with the antisocial and aggressiveness of the child. We know if the social skills are low, and if social norms are violated, then we often term them as antisocial behavior. If there are existence of uh, antisocial elements, then definitely those are bound to create problems in the future of the child. And better if we can identify them, we can manage them in these progressive and productive years between 2 years and 6 years, then we can manage them and make sure that child will not having those things in future. based on the theory of the sensitivity here. Once we correct them and the child grows beyond 6 years, then most likely 99% chances that child will not repeat those problem behaviors in the future. Under this antisocial and aggressive, we have got again 8 checkpoints. These 8 checkpoints will help us to understand what are those skills that child uh, can be termed as antisocial or displaying some kind of antisocial or aggressive behavior. Then the fourth subcomponent or fourth subcriteria of problem behavior is social withdrawal. If the child is not connected to the social environment, we often call them withdrawing from those social things. And the moment child will be withdrawing himself or herself from the social connectivity, then the effectiveness to manage the social issues will be negatively uh, affecting to the child's performance in the future. Under that, we have got 7 checkpoints, and these 7 checkpoints will help us to know what are the extent that our child will be displaying some kind of social withdrawal symptoms or not. So it goes without saying that once we understand these are the components of social withdrawal, then that becomes very easy for us, that provides the easy opportunities for us to teachers as well as parents to address them quite easily and effectively. Then the fifth subcriteria under this problem behavior is the anxiety or somatic behavior of our children. Sometimes as parents or teachers, we do not often accept if our child displaying some kind of anxiety or some kind of somatic behavior. But if we cover them and will not work on them, then those kind of problems will aggravate and it will create a bigger problem in future. So my submission to all the parents and teachers is that if we are provided some kind of technique, some kind of tools to identify those symptoms which which is related to anxiety and somatic behavior. In fact, it is good for us to work on them and ensure that those problem behaviors are addressed effectively. Therefore, the preschool years are very important, because in the preschool years we have got the high sensitivity to manage those skills, plus we have got the Montessori based education system and specialized schools and teachers who can identify them very easily. Therefore, all the parents who are just trying to avoid the preschool years, my suggestion would be, please ensure that your child is getting into some kind of preschool so that those areas can be strengthened. Under this anxiety and somatic behavior, we have got 8 checkpoints. So once we bring these checkpoints, it becomes easy for the teachers and parents to know the extent at which whether there is a anxiety or no anxiety, whether there is a somatic behavior presence or somatic behavior not present. So better, good knowledge, better awareness, better would be managing, would be better to manage the things for our child. So these are the five sub criteria we'll be managing, and we'll deal with each one of them very detailing way, so that will empower us to teachers and parents to manage our children quite effectively. Then, as I said, each of these 5 criteria under problem behavior can be managed, can be quantified, and can be documented. So how we are going to quantify that evaluation of outcome and the score? If it is never, that means for a particular checkpoint related to that particular sub criteria, if something that is never present in our child, then we provide a score of 0. And any of the checkpoints under this 5 sub criteria, if that particular checkpoint is rarely present in our child, then we give a score of 1. Then any checkpoint under any sub criteria, if that is present sometimes, that means our child is displaying that particular checkpoint sometimes, we assign a score of 2. And if our child is often displaying that particular checkpoint that we are trying to evaluate our child under these 5 sub criteria, then we assign a score of 3. Meaning, if the score here is high, then the problem behavior is high. And if the score is less for either of the sub criteria, then the problem behavior seems to be low. So once we understand, imagine the power of this tool. If we understand under each 5 sub criteria what is the score of a child, if we know that child is displaying a little bit of more problem behavior under a sub criteria, then that gives us the power to work with our child in those early years. Once the age goes past 6 years, 7 years, and child becomes little rigid and the sensitivity period is over, then working on those areas becomes very, very difficult. And let's understand this. My submission to all the parents and teachers, please understand the fact that even if there are problems, let it be. It is very natural to have problems in the kids. And that's where the whole thing, the scientific development is happening, to identify them in right time so that we can work on them. And fortunately, we have the power of sensitivity so that anything we can work during this period, we can successfully handle them quite well. So these are the evaluation technique for this. We'll be having this scoring system. But if you are just not understanding anything for this scoring system, do not worry. In our future sessions, we'll be discussing each checkpoint, assignment of score, everything in details so that you will be able to evaluate your child or any children in your school quite effectively. So that's all about the technique of preschool and kindergarten social skill evaluation technique. And this is what all about the introduction about the social skill development series. And next session, we'll start with the first sub criteria of social skill, which deals with social cooperation. We have to see, as far as social cooperations are concerned, what are the 12 skills that we need to understand? We need to evaluate our child on each of these 12 skills and manage them quite well, so that we have to ensure our child is better on these 12 skills, so that child will not be lagging behind as far as social effectiveness is concerned. So thank you very much, and we'll be looking forward to welcome you in our next session, which will be dealing with social cooperation. And Adi has been doing such kind of scientific evidence-based techniques for the uh, development of the skill in the preschool years. And thank you very much for your patient hearing, and see you very soon in the next session, which will be dealing with the social cooperation of our children.